Uh, Last Sunday I started with this idea that this movie, they were fighting for the freedom that they were looking for. And there is a lot of, I don't know, moments in history that people were fighting because they were, in submission to some governments in other countries. They were just fighting for their freedom. And in some way, for Christians, we also were a slave of something, right? We were a slave of sin. And now we are free in some way from that sin. And now we become slaves of who? Jesus. So we submit also to who? To Jesus. So now we are going to be talking about how we can submit to the government. And this is, in some way, we can spend the whole class talking about just that topic, and maybe another class talking about that topic also, but we don't have the time. So we are just going to see some things in the way that we can just go through this chapter, and next Sunday we can begin in chapter 3, talking about wives and husbands. It's not interesting that in chapter 3, when you see that section of wife and husband, you see that 6 verses talking about what? Wives. And just 1 verse for husband. And I always see that like really interesting. I don't know why 6. Just 1 for men. Maybe ladies need more explication of what they need to do. Sometimes we understand just with short things like do this, okay. And ladies like do that. Why? What about this? What about that? So I don't know. But let us see some things. Again, four different groups in some way, but the same idea, talking about submission. Okay. And I hope that you can just see those 4 different groups that are talking about submission, that you can just apply that to your life. Because sometimes we have, in some way, or we don't understand why or how we need to submit in some way to other people. But when you see in other scriptures that we're supposed to submit to one another also. And how that looks like, well, I cannot tell you that, but I can tell you this, that Peter is going to teach about how to submit to the government, how to submit to your master or your boss. In some way, we can apply that to that. Or how to submit to your husband, how to submit to your wife, okay? And again, this is 4 different groups, and we're going to be talking about this, I hope, just in 2 classes. So the first one is citizens. And let us read that passage, okay? Verse 13, be subject for the sake of the Lord to every human institution, whether to the king as the one in authority or to the governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do what? Good. For such is the will of God, that by doing good you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as what? Free people, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as a slave of God. In verse 17, honor all people, love the brethren, fear God, honor the king. So, as you see in verse 17, it's like the conclusion of that idea, okay? You have to honor everyone, even the king, and love the brethren, and fear God. And there is something interesting that he finished with that idea with that verse in verse 17. So let us talking about the citizen, submission versus rebellion. And I know there's like everywhere we have this kind of problem. People are going to rebel against what? Authority, right? Why do you think is the case of that?
The work of the devil?
Yeah. Why do you want to rebel against someone who has authority?
Sometimes they're evil.
Sometimes they're evil in the work of the devil. But sometimes they're abuse their what? Power, authority. And when they're abusing their power and their authority, what are you going to do? Rebel. I don't want this anymore.
You fight back.
Yeah, you fight back. So when Peter was writing this letter, During what time specific? Nero's time.
He wasn't a good guy.
What was happening during that time? Christians were dying. Why? Because of their faith. So this guy who was the king was killing these Christians because they were confessing their faith before this guy who was the king. Let us kill this Christian. Now, do you see in the first century that one of the writers wrote about, yeah, and we have all this amount of Christians, few thousand, and we went out to the street and we riot again, we rebelled against the empire of Rome. No, why?
That wasn't God's way.
Yeah, it's a good answer, because when you see in chapter 2, Peter is going to say, Peter is going to die, because this is the last time that Peter is writing a letter, and he is soon going to die. And Peter is going to say, because this is God's will to do what? Good. And someone can think like, wait a minute. We cannot rebel against the government when they are doing evil things. We are going to be talking about it, okay? So first, submission is not socially or culturally popular idea in the time we live in, right? And also, the U.S. was established through revolution, and the citizens pride themselves on having the freedom to say or do anything, anytime, anywhere. Now, is that a good thing?
Freedom is very good.
Now, the majority of the people now, are they using their freedom in a good way? No. Now you have the freedom to say what is evil and to tell the people that are saying something that is good to shut up. Why? Because we don't want to hear that. We want to hear what is what? What is evil, but we are going to tell you that it's good. Because, again, they call good what? Evil, and evil good. It's nothing new, nothing new. So the root of many problems is rebellion. And we have to see that in many different ways. So they see that people are going out to the street because they want, something better. So they want to fight against the government because the government is not leading the country in the certain way that they are expecting. And again, I gave you this example last time when you are driving the car, the best driver, it is the one who is sitting next to you. And like, yeah, I am doing a better job, and you're not even driving, but I am doing a better job. Stop there. Go slow. Go faster. But sometimes we don't know how that job looks like, but we think we can do it better, but we are not doing it, right? So I know there's a difference between when a governor or someone who is in power is doing an evil job and taking advantage of what he has, or the power that he has, and you think like, what is he or she doing something like that when that person is in power, is supposed to do good to their citizens? And now, when is the only time that you're supposed to, when you don't obey the government?
If it goes against the word of God.
Now, someone will say, we're supposed to obey the government all the time, 100%. And let me say, you're supposed to obey the government 100%, but if that 100% is something that is against God, what you are going to do? You are going to obey God, what? First. And someone will say, well, give me an example of that. Well, read the book of Daniel. And you are going to see in the book of Daniel more than one example when even Daniel said, I will not obey the authority. I will pray anyway 3 times a day, even when the government said you cannot pray.
And leave my curtains open.
Yeah, and you see that the other 3 guys, yeah, and you see the other 3, well, that's a good point. Because he was, in some way, his face was in the direction of the temple. So that's why his window was open. But it's an interesting story. Okay. But in the same way, Daniel and his 3 friends, what about them? They were not willing to what? Bow before this, image. We're not going to do that. God is going to rescue us. If He's not, doesn't matter. We're not going to do it anyway. So the only time when we refuse to submit to the government is when they say something against God. And they are telling you to do it, and I will not do it. Because Jesus said, if you confess me before what? Man, I will confess you before my Father who is in heaven. So it's not just saying I am following Jesus. It's not just saying that. It's showing with your action. I will not do what you said. I will do what God says. So that is the idea of chapter 2 and verse 13. And we can see in many different ways, people are just going out and just saying we want something better and we want something. So there's nothing new, right? But Christians are different. Are you going to change people just going out and just protesting because the government is terrible? Are you going to change people's mind, people's heart? No. What is the best way to change people's heart? Yeah, by what you do, but Jesus is the only one who can what? Change the heart. And doesn't matter what you do. Sometimes people are going to keep doing what they are doing for whatever reason. And again, we see more and more all the time, out there, and people now want to submit to the authority. And that is a difficult idea to present, because when you have young people who are always being, when you have let's say young boy who is, a baby who is maybe 2 or 3, and that young baby learn that doesn't matter if mom or dad says something, that little boy is not going to obey, and let he keep growing and growing and keep doing the same and the same and the same, it's going to be a point what? That I don't have to obey anybody, right? Because my mom was saying something and my dad was saying something, and I was ignoring that, and no consequences for that, and I don't care, so now I can do the same. And we have a lot of young people doing that, right? They're going out, I don't care about the consequence because there is no consequence because I did not have consequences in my house. So now I can think the same. So the dictionary defines rebellion as the refusal to accept authority, and also the opposed authority, government law, and to defy control by another. So rebellion means to refuse, defy, and oppose all forms of authority. And that is the problems of the root of many problems, right? Rebellion. We see Satan that is not submitting to God in many different ways. And we see other people who are not submitting to God and they're doing evil in many different ways. So why are Christians to submit to civil authority? Verse 13. Why are you supposed to submit to the authority of the government?
Because God said so.
Yeah, that's true.
And He put him in charge.
It is also true.
He appoints the authorities. God's in control, and they are there because He allowed them to be there. So submit to them.
Yeah, that is a great answer. It's coming from the book of Romans. But what do you see in verse 13? Why are you supposed to submit to the government? For the Lord's sake. Are you doing that for that person? Are you doing that for just that president or for that governor or for that authority? Are you submitting to them because of them? No, it is because of who? Because of God. So I hope that you see the idea here that we submit to the authority and what they say. Trying to have this building, we were doing like different things in order to have the approval to worship here and from the government, You need this paper, you need this, you need this, you need... Okay, let us do that in order that we can do it because we want to submit to that authority. And the same when paying taxes, right? Why do we pay taxes? Because... Yeah, it's true. But the government said you have to pay taxes. Now, we have the problem with, I don't want to pay my taxes because they're going to use the money for what? For something that is not good. Is that your business.
No. You just follow what God says, do it, and He will deal with everybody else.
You know that if these people are just receiving money from you and you are submitting to the authority, like, and they are receiving that money, who is going to be responsible for using that money? You or that people? So God is going to judge who? Them for what they are doing. But my responsibility is what? I will submit. If this is something that is not against God, I will do it. Because I want to be an example in every different area and to show others that this is what Christians are doing. So again, we submit for the Lord's sake. And then Romans 13, verse 1, Jack is going to be talking about this in the future. But notice what Romans 13, verse 1. So in verse 13, in chapter 2, Peter is saying, you submit to the authority for the Lord's sake. But notice what the Apostle Paul is saying. Let every person be subject or submission to the governing authorities. Notice what he is going to say. For there is no authority except from who? And those that exist have been instituted by God. Now, we can have many different questions about, what about this guy who is evil and doing evil things? God put that person in power? And the answer is what? Yes. Now, do we need to know the reason for that? No.
We can ask God to avenge us for them.
We need to pray for that person, but God is doing something that we don't know, but we want to know, but we don't know. And God is doing something that, again, we do not what? Understand or know. Sometimes when someone is evil in power, maybe God is judging other people using this man. When some country they are fighting against other countries, maybe God is using that people to judge other nations. We don't know what God is doing, but what we know is what? God is in charge. And He is putting kings and taking out what? King. He's putting those who are in power and authority. Max?
They're doing something that's evil, wrong, and we're suffering for it. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to suffer.
Yeah. It's a good way that you say that, because when you see in chapter 2, we are going to read the example of Jesus, that He suffered for doing good. Suffered for doing good. Okay, so for this is the will of God, that by doing what? Okay, how many people today, they want to know God's will? I want to know God's will. I want to know God's will. I hope that He can talk to my ear and say something like, I want to know that. I hope that He can come in my dreams and He can say something like, well, when you read this verse is saying what? This is God's what? Will. What is God's will in this verse? Yeah. By doing good, you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. Foolish people. How foolish it is that I can say that I know better than God. How foolish of me that I can say that I can do better job than God. How foolish of me that I can say, why the people are suffering there and God is not doing anything about it. How foolish I am. Do I know better than God? Not at all. That is foolish of me. And how many people that are saying, like, if there is a God, why these people are dying of, they don't have food? Or why these people are having this terrible problem? Why that people is, evil in the world? Why is suffering in the world? If there is a God, why? Why? How foolish of me to say something like that when I do not know better than God. And sometimes I do not know better than other people. Clinton?
People would rather see a sermon than hear one.
Yep.
Do what's right when nobody's looking and they're looking. Just do what's right, and that'll have a good effect.
Yep. Yeah, you never know when people are going to, see you doing something. You never know. So Nero was the king or the person in power during Peter's time and during that the first century, and you know that he was known by his evilness in some way. And what Peter said, "For the Lord's sake, you are going to submit." Is Peter submitting to that in that point? Yeah, but he just keep preaching, right? I'm not going to submit in that area. If you say that I need to stop preaching and need to stop, sharing the gospel, I will not do that. But now we have in this country the freedom to preach the gospel, to just share Jesus, right? But in other countries, in some countries, they don't have that freedom. So how are you going to just deal with that thing? When sometimes when we do not have the freedom to preach or to teach about Jesus, sometimes we are doing it more. But sometimes when we have the freedom to do it, we have excuses to not do it. And like, why? I know. It's like, I know, humanity in some way. So this is the will of God. And again, submission. Talking about submission. This is God's will, that you submit. Sometimes we cannot see that idea. So later we have another section that we can go with that. It's talking about slaves. So we can apply this to my relationship with my boss, right? If I'm working for some company, I can just have some kind of be related to this idea. Servant. Be submissive to your master with all respect. Do you ever have a time in your life that you were working for someone and that person was not treating you well, and you were in your head like, I want to punch his face and just with my hammer, like, ugh.
Not the hammer. And not to punch the face, but
Frustration.
Yeah, but you understand the idea, right? The frustration that you have because some people are treating you in not a good way, and you're like, ugh. And sometimes you cannot control yourself, and you are just responding to that aggressive attitude that they have. And like, now we have that, freedom to do that. But for slaves, do they have that freedom back there? If you are not respectful to your master, what is the consequence for that? You can even die for that. So it's a huge consequence, and what Peter is saying is, this is for your good. If you're a slave, this is for your good. Just be respectful. And not only to those who are what? Good and gentle, but also to those who are unreasonable. Notice what Peter is saying. There are going to be people who are not reasonable. Voila. But also, this is the idea of household slave, not just those slaves in out there in the country. But notice that this idea unreasonable is also the idea of, but also those who are perverse. Not everyone is going to be a good boss, right? And sometimes the majority are not really good. But in this moment, what is the difference between them and ours? The difference between them and us is like they were slaves, and we are not. And we can just, if we don't like one of those jobs that we are doing, we can just look for another what? Job. And we can switch, and we can change, and we can whatever, right? But again, this is like difficult.
I used to, not just used to, I would tell my grandchildren, my nephews and nieces, I said, you're supposed to honor your mother and your father. There's no stipulation that God says when they're nice or good. He said, honor your mother and your father. So, what's the word? Honor it. Not when they're nice.
Yeah.
When they're not nice.
Yeah, it is. It's always difficult because we're always, trying to point the finger to them because of them we just are reacting in the way that we are reacting. If someone is yelling at you, and that person is really angry, and now you are going to do the same, now you are responsible for that reaction, right? But if you are just saying something gentle in some way, and firm, but gentle, now you are responsible for what? For your reaction, but you know that your reaction was what? The best possible that you can do. So if you are going to treat other people in the same way that they are treating you, we're going to have a crazy world, right? We already do. Yeah, but Christians are showing something different, right? We're not paying like in the same way. We're not doing the same thing that they're doing. We're trying to be different like Jesus is different. And remember that the Apostle Paul said, be imitators of me because I am already imitating what? Who? Christ. How much do we need to change in order to be like Paul and also like Jesus? How much? And again, this is something like, sometimes we don't think about it, like, I'm trying to be like Jesus. I'm trying to be like him. So I need to change in every way. So, note in verse 19, for this finds favor for the sake of conscience toward God. A person bears up under sorrow when suffering unjustly. This is some kind of attitude that we're supposed to have. Now, notice the example that Peter is going to give us. The example of Jesus, okay? And I hope that you can look this picture because nobody here suffered in that way, right? So if you think that someone is treating you in a bad way, think about who? Jesus. Oh, this person is not treating me well. What about Jesus? He died for my sins. He died because of my rebellion. He died because I was not submitting to his will. But now I feel like, oh, someone is treating me bad, and like, I don't want that. Think about who again? Jesus. Jesus, I want to be like you. Notice that, leaving you an example for you to follow his step. Notice what verse 20 said. For what credit is it if when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? But if when you do good and suffer for it, you endure. This is a gracious thing in the sight of who? The sight of God. There is a call for us to suffer. Let us suffer for doing what is what? Good and right. Now in verse 21, for this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for me. You can write your name there. Jesus Christ suffered for me. Leaving you what? Leaving you as an example, so that you might follow in his what? Steps. Verse 22, he committed no sin, neither was deceit found in his mouth. When he was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not treat him, but continuing trusting himself to him who what? Judges justly. This is the mindset that we're supposed to have. When someone is treating us, not in the good way, what is the mindset that we're supposed to have? God is going to judge that people. God is going to do the job. God is going to do it, not me. My job is I am following what Jesus did. I am doing what Jesus did because I want to be like him, because then someday I will live with him in heaven. So I'm trying to be like him today, because someday, what? I'm going to be with him. So again, this is the idea. Notice verse 24. He himself bore our sin in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wound you have been healed. For you were straying like sheep, but have now returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls. Notice in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. But we see him who for a little while was made lower than angels, namely Jesus, crowned with glory and honor. Because of what? Because of the suffering of death. So that by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. For it was fitting that he, for whom and by whom all things exist, and bringing many sons to glory, should make the founder of their salvation perfect through what? Suffering. Jesus suffered because of you and me. Now it's my turn to suffer for him. I will do it for him. So, now in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this what? Light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all what? Comparison. As we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen, for the things that are seen are what? Transient. For the things that are seen are what? Eternal. We're looking something better that is waiting for us where? In heaven. Looking for something better. David, can you check outside? Thank you. But the things that are seen are eternal, okay? Also, Jesus was innocent, and this was unfair, right? And sometimes when someone is treating us in not in a really good way, we think like, I am innocent, and also this is unfair. I'm going to tell you what is unfair. What is unfair? That Jesus died for my sins upon the cross, and I'm still doing what I'm not supposed to be doing. That is unfair. That he keep loving me all the time, every day, every single minute, and sometimes I am not doing what he says. It is unfair. But unfair is not when someone is treating you in a bad way. That is not unfair. You are going to react in the best way possible. So Jesus, he was our standard of suffering, substitute of suffering, and the shepherd of those who suffer. And I'm glad that we finished that section because next Sunday we're going to be talking about submission again, but related to your spouses. So I hope that you can come. Maybe nobody's going to be here. So thank you. We are done.